Welcome back to Season 3 of The International Classroom. I'm Alex Gray, and this episode marks the beginning of a special two-part series on a topic that's transforming education worldwide: artificial intelligence. And today, we're partnering with the British schools in the Middle East to bring you expert advice on using and implementing AI as you prepare for the new school year. So, whether you're just getting started or you're looking to deepen your AI integration, our global leaders have insights to help make the most of these powerful tools. So, get ready to explore practical strategies and inspiring ideas that can reshape how we teach and learn. Today's episode of the International Classroom is brought to you by Smart Technologies, leaders in creating interactive solutions that empower educators and students alike. From smart boards to innovative software, Smart is making classrooms more connected, engaging, and effective. Discover how their cutting-edge tools can transform your approach to teaching and learning by visiting Smart Technologies today. Now, let's dive into the episode. As AI continues to make its way into the classroom, the big question is, how can we leverage it effectively to enhance learning? In this special collaboration with the BSME, we're connecting with educators across the world to share their top tips for integrating AI in ways that are meaningful and impactful. From personalized learning to AI-driven assessments, this episode will give you the ideas and inspiration to make AI a valuable part of your educational toolkit. Let's hear from our international experts on how AI is reshaping education in real time.
The first message I would say is be kind. Be kind to yourself. You're starting a new year. You're starting with something that hasn't really been used in the classroom or in your school yet, if it's the first time that they're using it. And recognize that you've already got so much value that can support what you're doing with AI. AI is not coming in to replace your quality and your role. It's rather there to be able to allow you to do what you do better. And yes, it's not a silver bullet. You don't take it and it does everything for you, but it does take a moment to be able to realize that AI is there to support you. You're not there to support the AI. I think that's a starting point. And whether you're an educator, as a teacher going into the classroom and thinking about your students, your relationship with them and understanding how you bring learning to them and ignite their passion for learning is going to be the center of how you use AI. And if you're a leader thinking about meaningful and sustainable change, if we think about AI in terms of what it is, it's not just a new piece of educational technology that comes and goes. It has the potential, if it's used ethically and safely and sensibly, to start shifting not just education, but the way that we interact with the world. So rushing into a specific solution may not only prevent you from being able to bring it on into your community, into your school, into your classroom, but it can also stop the potential of what AI might be for you. So be kind. I'll go back to that message of be kind to yourself and take things slowly. You don't have to rush into it. Get comfortable with it in a sense that maybe play around with it, see where it is. Don't bring it straight into your classroom. Don't expect it to start doing everything for you right away, but rather think about what it is that you want it to serve.
There's a great point you've made about like what is it you want it to do, and I think that's obviously a misconception a lot of the time, isn't it? That it's just there you go. Just it'll do everything, and then the expectation is kind of maybe skewed. It's too much, but that focus on what is it you want it to do for you. Let's say, if it's educated, you're probably going to say then, but from a leader's perspective, then if you sort of carrying you on into that, where would we go then from a leader's side of this?
It's a great question, and I think the leadership side has more nuance to it, and the reason why is because as a leader, you've got so many people and so many complex responsibilities that come into play. So it's not just a one-off training, but rather there's AI in the form of training and getting everyone to understand the potential of what it can have in the classroom or within your school, but also the risks as well. And that's not exclusive to just your teachers in the classroom, but it's also your parents. How are they responding to AI in terms of their children? Deepfakes, security, data security. There's potential risks that come with AI, but AI is a new technology that's not just impacting the classroom, but it's impacting what's outside of the classroom, the home, the friendships, social media, and parents being a part of that partnership, teachers being a part of that partnership. The leader's role is to facilitate what that can mean for them. So if you do a one-off training, that might be helpful as a leader, but that might be a great starting point. But how do you create a culture around what you're doing with AI in a way that this can be something that the community can buy into? So as a leader, I would say what could be helpful is having those conversations with your stakeholders, having them an understanding of what students are expecting with AI. What are parents? What are they concerned about? What are they expecting? And having those conversations together, I think, can shift it from being a one-dimensional look at what the potential AI challenges and opportunities could be, but rather a community-led and a community-driven perspective.
Those are great points about it, because I think in education we kind of just see it as like teacher, and then we concern about student use. But actually, as you've mentioned there are a lot more players, I'm going to use the term there, in this game. And so I'm now listening to what you've said, and I'm like, you know what? Yeah, that's a really valid point. Actually, I've had my concern about students, but you know what? I really need parent buy-in. I really need parents to understand what it is we're trying to achieve with this, and also so that they're educated to protect their children, but to also encourage them. What would be your advice? What would you recommend for me wanting to achieve that? How do I go about then talking with parents and presenting this to parents so that they, one, feel that they've gained an area of education and knowledge about it, but also feel supported?
I would say the first step for me would be just being open, being transparent, and working with the parents as opposed to working on the parents. And I think that could be a very different perspective when you're in it. So I don't know the context of the school for the person who's listening to this, the leader who's listening to this, but you, the person listening to this, will know your relationship with parents well, and the same way that you would introduce something that hasn't necessarily been addressed, whether it's, it could be anything from social media to mental health. There are so many areas that have complexities. How you go about that might be depending on the context with your own school and your own community. But what I would say is be open with your parents and realize that there's no expectation to know all the answers. AI is emerging and it's evolving, and what we knew yesterday, it might change tomorrow. So it's constantly changing, and doing that together, being open with your parents about the impact that could have, and also the knowledge that the parents, some parents could be experts in AI, some parents could have no understanding of AI, but they might have understandings of other areas that could be helpful, being able to share together. So I think having a conversation, sharing concerns and possible opportunities that could come from AI together with parents. And also, I think this is the most crucial as well, is anchoring it with where that might be relevant to their children and how that might tie into their education, as opposed to just AI in general. I think that could be a really helpful starting point.
Yeah, I think there's a great piece of advice for educators and leaders coming back into school now, because for us, one of the things that I've noticed internationally is a lot more things we call coffee mornings or coffee afternoons, where parents will come in and have these conversations about certain things that are going on within a year group. And we're starting now to see one or two more that sort of things that take place about how do you revise and supporting children, mental health, those types of things. And I think what we're going to see more of now, and it's inspired me as a new head of sixth form to go, you know what, I probably do need to have more and want to have more parents, not say, what can I do? Support sessions, training sessions, but utilizing my knowledge as well for what I know about AI to take them through the types of things, and even let them have a go. It's no different from doing a workshop for teachers. You just do now a workshop for parents, because we all know that if we can support the students at home and support parents with this, it then becomes a community, like you said. And I think that's a really good starting point, a really good thought point for any educator, no matter where they are in the world, who's going to be utilizing AI to actually think about, how do I bring in parents to support students, their children with this? And I think that's a really good way to think about it. So thank you for that advice this morning, Efraim. I really, really appreciate it.
My favourite piece of advice I give to people who are fearful or a little bit sceptical or even like brand new to it, depending on where you are on that journey, is it's about playing. Everything's about playing. We learn through play. The challenge will be is that some people say you should use this tool, some people say use this tool, some people say you should use this tool. So I very much advise going and have a little play and then start to play around with that idea of looking for its limitations. So finding out, how do you make it so that it writes in UK English, for example? How do you get it so that it doesn't use in the realm of or other AI telltales in then generative AI speeches? Or how do you make sure that the images are right? So I would definitely say it's about playing, but then looking for its limitations and starting there. So the easiest entry tools for most people are things like Google Gemini, ChatGPT, free versions, Claude, free versions. But it's not about the tool per se. It's about that mindset of play when you're going into it.
Yeah. And for those people who this might be their first introduction to you, you are well known throughout our educational stuff over the years, guys. And I really want to dive into that because we often see people, I think, are quite closed-minded with the ideas of how they can use AI. So what advice would you give me to help broaden my perspective on the different ways in which I can use AI within education or even further afield?
My conversations have always been the willingness to be able to put things on the table. So there's some things that are off limits for a lot of people, and the question is why they're off limits. So things like assessment, that's off limits. Marking, reports, feedback in an education perspective, data analysis, they're off limits. And the question is, why are they off limits? It's not saying should they be off limits, and I'm not saying they shouldn't be off limits. So like, for instance, like, I know we might get into things like data and protection and privacy and stuff, but ultimately, if those are the reasons, then they're valid reasons. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we shouldn't be willing to question. And just because we've questioned them once doesn't mean that we should never question them again. So my whole thought process in that is that you should keep asking him why we do what we do. And rather than accepting that we've always done it like that waddle problem, that dilemma, like what we've always done it like that, like ask the question of why we've always done it like that. And is there a better way to do this? There's obviously loads of little clever little sayings like there's an AI for that, or is there an app for that? And I think in a world where many of the people that we are educating, or almost all of the people that we're educating, are coming from that digital first perspective, not digital natives, because I don't think anybody comes out of the womb being able to use an iPad or prompting ChatGPT, but I think they're digital first. And Nicholas Cole talks about this from Category Pirates. He talks about that idea of their default is to find a digital solution, whereas some of us, we're like learned digitals, so we don't always, we have analog options. And so if that is the case, and we're bridging that generational transition, then perhaps we need to just think about, is there a digital option for that, and why have we always done it like this? To therefore ask the questions, right? So then it's not about we shouldn't do this or we should do that. It's we know why we do what we do.
It's fantastic. I think that's a great piece of advice, because from first-hand experience, this time of year when we come back in, we've got that time together as a department, and we're looking at ways and means for the year ahead. And it's important that we ask that question of why. If we're going to use the technology or the tool of AI, why? What is it serving that purpose of something can do that analog or me as a teacher can't? And I think that's a really great piece of advice as a starting point as you're coming in for sort of middle leaders and educators, is having those questions, being able to ask those questions. But let's say now I'm a senior leader. Let's say I'm higher up in a school and I'm looking at this. I want to bring this in. What would be your advice for a leader who wants to get started with this? How can they go about bringing this in to whole school and making it something that's consistent and that why of value?
So in some of the conversations I've been having with school leaders or department heads or whatever else that looks like, in terms of asking very, very similar questions, Alex, it's been based on this idea of creating a culture of managed risk taking, which there's a few bits in that. So we've got to create a culture. Now, we create a culture by setting values and agreeing values and allowing people to become part of that. That's usually a shared conversation. Or if you already got those values, sharing those values, you're creating a culture of managed risk taking. So if we're risk averse, which by nature most people are, and especially in education, I've been there, like you don't want to risk it because particularly if parents are paying for that, or even if they're not paying for it, there's a risk that you've only got a certain amount of time with a student before they've got to pass an exam or they've got to go on to the next thing. So like that risk taking is not necessarily synonymous with what we do, or have got a culture and a system that allows for that. So if we create a culture of managed risk taking, and that managed bit is really important, we're not talking let's just jump off a cliff and say, let's play with everything without any questions. We should be asking questions around GDPR. We should be asking questions about ethics and bias. We should be asking questions about hallucinations. We should be asking these kind of things, right? So, in order to do that, I think we need to create a culture. And how you do that is about bringing people with you. So in almost all of these digital moves and transitions that people go through, it's about getting your trailblazers in early. So who are the people that you're early adopters that you can work with and empower them to lead where they are, and then that the coaching element sits with it. So I've been very, very fortunate to coach like groups of staff or individual staff through that process and asking them the questions or helping them think about the questions they need to consider. So as a leader, that movement towards coaching either yourself or bringing a coach in really, or empowering some of your other staff to coach others is really, really important to manage that risk taking, but also to create a culture where that's normalized.
I think if you feel like you're missing out right now on the AI tools that are being used, of maybe some of your colleagues who are doing some amazing things with these new artificial intelligence tools, do not be worried, because you are alongside most teachers out there. I'm really lucky I get to travel the world and speak to teachers. And I remember someone saying to me actually about a year and a half ago, you're going to really have to change what you're doing fast in terms of my presentations and my training, because AI is going to advance so much. The thing is, it has advanced so much, but what teachers need hasn't advanced all that much, because it takes us time. It takes us time to trust technology, to implicate it, and especially if we're kind of lone rangers out there. So do not be worried about this whatsoever. And just simply, I would suggest if you have got someone in your organization who's using it, go and have a conversation with them, because you probably know this, that they'll want to tell you about it, because if you're using an amazing tool, they will have any audience they want that they need to kind of talk about the impact of these tools. So have a chat with them, see what they're using. And I would suggest you start using the tools they're using, because then you can go on that journey together, whether that be something like ChatGPT, whether it be one of the more kind of product-based for education in terms of, there's a great one called School AI. There's loads out there, but I would seek out the person in your organization, see what they're using, give that a try, and go on a journey with that person, and then bring other people along with you as you go. And if you don't get it, if it frustrates you, if you're confused by the technology, do not worry. Just have a go, and then build those relationships to help you get by. And like anything, if you're not getting impact out of it, drop it, move on to something else. It's not the be all and end all, but I do think when you use it correctly, it can save lots of time. It can help us be creative, and it can bring classrooms alive in ways that I don't think have been possible before.
Yeah, I completely agree from my own experience of using it. So what type of things would you say, like for teachers who want to integrate it, and they do want to integrate it into their classrooms, what would be the types of things that they should be looking out for?
I think if you want to integrate artificial intelligence into your classroom, first thing you want to do is ask the question why. We don't just want to put a new tool in there for the sake of it. Research, see what these tools can do, I think probably the two best use cases at the moment of these tools, and it is changing all of the time, but at the moment, it is enabling personalized learning to a certain extent with students and helping to be more efficient as a teacher with admin style jobs. Now, I think those are the two best use cases at the moment. There's lots of experimentation going on, different tools coming out, but we know that those two use cases are quite solid at the moment. So, for example, if you want to save yourself some time with some admin work, using a tool like ChatGPT or Google Gemini, if you're a Google school, and just having a conversation with it, asking it to get us to do a small task for you. It's really interesting. One of the most asked questions I get is, can it do this, or will it be able to do this for me? And the response always is, just ask it. Just ask it. This is not like any technology we have ever used before. We don't have to learn to speak the technology's language. It kind of knows our language now, which is amazing in some respect, because we can speak to it. We can speak to it like we would speak to another human being. And if you were working with somebody and you needed something from them, you would ask them, and you would ask them again. And if they didn't understand, you would figure out another way of communicating with them in terms of maybe changing the words you're using or sending them an email as a reminder. Similar here. We've got to learn to communicate with these tools. I suppose the one drawback is there that although it speaks our language is so complex and subjective, which means that you can't just give it a straight instruction and then expect something of a certain quality. It's got to work a bit like you build a relationship with a human, where you get to know kind of how they tick, you ask them things in certain ways, and so on. So it's building up that back and forth type relationship, which sounds funny, building relationships with technology. I'm not saying fall in love with it or anything, but just get to know how it works and talk with it, and you will get to know how it works. I think also with maybe encouraging a bit of creativity in the classroom and a bit of personalization with students, a tool that will help you create a bespoke Q&A type experience for students, I think can be really helpful. Now, it doesn't sound that sexy when I put it like that, but essentially there are tools out there. There's lots of them. I go back to school AI because I think it's really good in what it does. It's very simple to use. But you can essentially train an AI on your curriculum, on your expectations, to have your tone of voice, and so on. And then it's just there so your students can't get a hold of you because they're at home. Your students can't get your attention because you're helping somebody else in the class. Then they can ask this bot questions. It's not going to replace you. It's not you. It's nowhere near you. But it's just a way for them to interact with the type of things that you teach them, and the curriculum, maybe some exam materials. So can help plug some of those gaps. And because the students asking it questions, can be a bit more personalized to what they need, instead of then just listening to a message that's geared towards 20 or 30 students in the class. It's geared towards them and what they need in that moment. So a couple of ways that you can just start using this, and with others in your organization, start to see some cool results, I think.
Yeah, that's really good advice as well, because I think at the moment, and we see teachers, we talk about it with a teacher use, but the next layer is really, how do we get students to use it? And that comes with the confidence and the competence of a teacher. And so what you're saying there is, look, just start playing, start having a go. And there are easy ins. Like you said, School AI is an easy in. And there are other ones out there. I know I've used Mindjoy a lot. It's a really easy in terms of being able to work with students and teachers with the AI, and build that trust and relationship between everyone involved. But that doesn't come without its challenges. And you've probably seen this a lot in terms of common misconceptions or pitfalls. I think we're going to focus on. What would be some of the pitfalls teachers really want to look out for? And what would be your advice of, how do we overcome those challenges?
Yeah, I think probably the biggest pitfall, and it's kind of spinning the question on its head really, but I think the biggest pitfall is not trying this at the moment. I think, first of all, you've got nothing to lose, apart from maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And I know that's precious to a teacher. I'm a teacher myself. I know how precious time is. but giving it a go, having connected with people in your organization who are having a go with this, I think I honestly think there's the cost of a lost opportunity, which I think is probably the biggest thing at the moment. In terms of other pitfalls, if you have looked into these tools, you'll know this like the back of your hand, really, and if you've been exploring AI. But if you haven't, just little things like these large language models, as they're called, to use the technical term, are kind of probability machines. So sometimes they can get it wrong. ChatGPT 4 kind of hovers around the 94. I've seen some statistics, 97% accuracy. That's amazing. However, it's still going to bring up some inaccuracies. So you need to double check that. We need to evaluate the content we're getting. But I say think of this almost like an assistant, someone who is helping you out. And if you've got an assistant, or maybe you're the CEO of your organization, the principal, the head teacher may have a PA, an assistant, they will check things that their PA is doing and what they've produced before they send it out. It's just common practice. It's just like this. You want to check what it's doing, what it's coming out with, make sure that it reflects you, that it's helping your students. Also, if you're using it to create content, I think you want to just double check that your authentic voice is in there. Otherwise, you may as well just download the content off the internet and stick your own name on it. And I don't think anybody wants that. I don't think you really want that, because we still want to be authentically ourselves for this. So I think making sure our authenticity is there, checking for mistakes, and don't make the mistake of not trying it, because it's genuinely helping a lot of teachers at the moment. When I'm working with schools and school districts around the world, one of the main points I really try to get across to them is that when we're looking at something like innovation, and that's what we're talking about here with AI, it's coming in, it's changing things, we're getting new ideas, new ways of working. There are really two different types of innovation. Like kind of two sides of the same coin. The first type of innovation is, how can this help us do what we're already doing? And I think if you're just starting out on that journey, that's where you need to be. And that's where you're going to see the low-hanging fruit in terms of efficiency, in terms of helping with time saving, creativity, things like that. However, also just in the back of your mind, keep your attention on the non-linear side of innovation, which is not how can it help us do what we're already doing better, but maybe how can it transform what we're already doing into something better. And I think that's the side of innovation that's really challenging. It disrupts us a bit, makes us feel uncomfortable. It goes against maybe how we've been trained. However, I honestly think that the one constant in this world is change, and I think education is not immune from that. And I think we, and certainly myself, always want to continually change education so it's better for society, it's better for the students we're teaching, and better for us teachers as well. So always have that in the back of your mind. How could this maybe transform some of the stuff we're doing rather than just making it more efficient? And try to get the balance right there. It's kind of the job of a good leader to get that balance right across an organization. But I don't think that should take away from individual teachers within a school also having that kind of mindset. I think it'll set us up for the future and really help us to be creative with how we use these tools going into the next academic year.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to talk about today very quickly. I'm going to try and get through some slides with you today just to give you some context of what I'm talking about. I'm going to try and talk fast to get through this. Right, let's think first of all, hello everybody, my name's Dr. Nick Jackson. Let's talk about the fact that this, to me, is not an evolution. It should be seen as a revolution. So we should be seen to use generative AI as a vehicle for us to change what we do in education in radical ways. But of course, that's quite ambitious. What you should be thinking about right now and what's really should be at the forefront of your mind should be the reality that there is confusion out here. Your students are confused, their parents are confused, society's confused. We don't really know what we should be doing as a society around this AI stuff. The sort of headlines that people are getting thrust in front of them are still appearing or are still stuck in people's minds. And there's only really a small number of people who are seeing beyond that. for the majority of educators, the majority of students, the majority of parents, the majority of society. It is confusion. So AI is changing the world around us, and education is no exception, but it sits amongst this chaos. But having said that, generative AI is here to stay. Let's get over this fact that it's not a fad. It's not the same as any other technology. It's not going to go away. You can't dismiss this. You can't push it to one side. It's there either right in front of your face or sat behind the scenes. So to deny that fact is deny your students' education, is deny your self-education, and is to deny the progression that is happening as we speak. First and foremost, plagiarism detectors do not work. Can we be clear about this? They do not work. Yes, you may have them in your school. You may have the likes of Turnitin operating in your school. But if you rely on that for detecting on AI, you are simply wasting your time. Unpredictable, do not work with generative AI. So if you are going to use these tools, please use them with caution. Please use them and have conversations with students about their work rather than accusing people. I have seen this with my own daughter, where she's experienced this, and I've seen the sort of devastation that this can cause in terms of well-being with students and the culture that it breeds as regards trust and mistrust and those kinds of things. So let's be clear, they do not work. So what should you be doing? I believe it looks like this. This is a cycle that I've put together and something that I've been developing on. I don't think it's perfect. I don't think it's complete, but I think it does work in a very crude way. As a teacher, as an educator, I think it's your responsibility to be understanding what generative AI is, to what extent is questionable, but we'll get into that in a minute. I think you should be experimenting if you've not done so already, and you should continue to experiment. And then I think you've got to make key decisions, but they're not decisions you can make on your own as a teacher. They need to be made at a faculty level or at a school level. It depends on the environment you work in. So key decisions need to be made. And then you need to implement the sort of things that you've decided on. And then you'll go back to understanding again. So that's why it's cyclical, is this thing, because you're going to need to understand what happens when you implement these things. Now, it's okay me putting up a model like that, but that's not going to help you when you're starting in your school in the next week, the next day, whenever that is. You've got to see some examples to see what that looks like. So I'm going to give you some. First of all, if you're not got any understanding about generative AI, you can scan this QR code. It'll take you to a free course that I created in December 2022, a month after ChatGPT launched itself on the world and basically changed all our ideas of what artificial intelligence is. You don't have to use that course. I don't get any money from it. It's completely free. It doesn't really do me any justice whether you do or you don't. You can go to other places. But that's an example of the sort of course you can do. It's not been updated from then. It's still got examples on there, but it's to give you a basic understanding of what generative AI is and how it works and some prompts and those kinds of things. Hopefully you'll already have that understanding. But if you don't, please try and get your head around the way that generative AI works, especially so the likes of chatbots and what's actually going on and what they do and what they can't do, and really the fact that they are going to hallucinate sometimes and all those kinds of things. When you've done some understanding, please do some experimentation. Now, I'm not going to feature chatbots here because, of course, there are the likes of ChatGPT and the likes of Google Gemini and Claude and whatever else you want to use and Copilot. But experiment with other tools. I recommend Ideogram AI if you're going to do image generation and you don't want to get into the likes of Stable Diffusion and other highly sophisticated models. Ideogram is really good at producing text on your images. It's freemium. It gives you a lot free. Very easy to use for students as well. Nice interface. Highly recommend it. I'm not getting kickbacks for this. I'm just telling you this because this is what I use in my practice and we use in my school. So experiment with Ideogram. Experiment with Newark. Newark's beautiful at taking drawings and prompts and coming up with concept designs, as it shows in that example there. You don't get many on a freemium account with this, but what you can do is you can email them and tell them you're a teacher or a student, and they will give you unlimited credits. They don't have a teacher dashboard as yet. Also, they are saying that it has no age limit whatsoever. So we have some of our junior school kids using Newark. The power of this is unreal, to be able to come up with concepts, change those concepts, keep changing those concepts. So prototyping going forward. Try and think of that in terms of design, in terms of fashion, in terms of food, in terms of whatever you can think of in an entrepreneurial kind of mindset. Then I also want you to try and think of how writing or putting essays or reports or stories or whatever you traditionally conceive of the way that students will write or type things out in a different way. I want you to consider using presentation and voice. So Otter AI or Fireflies you can use as well as an audio transcription service, so AI audio transcription. Basically, you can use any device. I use my phone, I speak into this, I upload it into Otter, or I speak straight into Otter. It also can attend any online meeting whatsoever, or a face-to-face meeting and record what's going on. It then transcribes the whole of the conversation it hears, and that can be multiple people. And then it has a layer of AI on top of that. And that layer of AI will work with that transcription or across multiple transcriptions. So if you've got a number of people uploading audio, and then you've got a chatbot that sits within it, that sits on top of that, it will summarize what's happened. It will give you the main points. It will then allow you to chat with the audio that you've already recorded. So in terms of students producing authored work, written work, why can't they be speaking that work? Why can't they be presenting in the format of which this is, and then from that producing the text or using a spin-off of the audio that they prepared? We have to start thinking about how we present work and actually how many essays do students really need to do in their lifetime at school. When it comes to deciding, don't forget in that cycle, we come to the idea of deciding. I want you to decide on teaching and learning practices. So start to build custom GPTs. You don't have to be there in ChatGPT to do this. You can do it in the likes of Poe. It's very easy to do. I do it with students. I have a year 7 building custom chatbots. It gets them to understand how chatbots work and how prompts work. In your classroom, show from the front that you are using the likes of ChatGPT and these chatbots, and that you're not really fully secure in your knowledge. You're experimenting with them. So put things up on the board. Let your students chat with you. Suggest prompts and have a little discussion backwards and forwards with a chatbot, or use a chatbot in diverse ways in front of students. So create that idea of that you're in an experimentation and you're learning as well, and create that culture. Then you have to make some decisions on what cheating is. We're back to the plagiarism thing. So you will have cheating going on in your school. We've always had cheating. Cheating just didn't suddenly appear when AI launched itself upon us in a generative way. Cheating has always happened with copying other people's homework, asking for help, buying things offline, tutors, whatever format you want to put it in. So you have to have some agreement on what cheating is and what you're going to accept and what you're not going to accept. So although that's a provocation, it's really starting to unpack what are you going to accept in terms of AI within your faculty, as a teacher, within your school, within a certain piece of work, within a certain subject, and what you're not going to accept. And you have to make key decisions. And there's a huge grey area here. Decide on assessment techniques. So instead of just going with the same old format, where you've got a chance, you might look at getting a sample of writing to understand how a student writes in the first place. That way, when that changes, because they've decided to plagiarize or they've gone too far and what you've decided is plagiarism, you can look back and go, well, early on you weren't writing like this and suddenly you're writing like that. Get them to keep a process or learning journal where you get to see different drafts of their work, and then you can see any drastic changes. You can also use it to see what prompts they're using. If you actually want to bring in chatbot use or other AI tool use and look at the actual language that they're using to control the AI, maybe that's part of the assessment. You could also go with a Viva Vocal, where the idea is students have to defend their work. Maybe they actually produce a whole report in science, for instance, and you're not going to mark the science report. You're going to actually ask them questions on that science report, and they've got to be able to answer that question. Maybe you feed the science report into a chatbot and get it to come up with 3 random questions, and that's what you ask the students. So when it comes to deciding, there are all the things that I want you to consider, but I also want you to consider the idea of a sustainable approach. And that's when the implementation comes in. When you start to implement these ideas, what's going to work for you going forward? What's going to be sustainable as we go forward? What's going to work in your context, in your school, across your faculty, with your students? And that's where the implementation comes in. And that's where the cultural change comes in as well. And then you'll be back to the period of understanding, as I said in the beginning. That's it, people. I've given you a summary of what I think you should be focusing on right now as you go back to your school year. And as classic in my sort of world, I have a book coming out in 2 weeks. So if you like my sort of thing and the things I'm talking about here, you can read. Thank you. Good luck.
I actually think sometimes not having the technology background can be an advantage, because there are 3 things I think I would recommend before even thinking about the technology piece of it. So number 1, if I was starting back and I didn't have a lot of experience, but I wanted to think about what to do, I would first run a strengths assessment, not only for myself, but for my entire team. I would choose one of 2, and sometimes it's like not even choosing either or, it's like they build on each other. But the first one I recommend is the Spark type. It's a completely free assessment online by Jonathan Fields, and he has a wonderful podcast, but the assessment really talks about, it's not like a personality test. It's more about what energizes me at work and what drains me at work. And so I think that data, in an age where I think so many people are rushing to learn tech, which we'll get to, it's important. I don't think we spend enough time learning about ourselves for how to meaningfully apply the technology so that it's actually moving us forward in our goals and our outcomes. So the first one is a Spark type. It's free, great entry point for teams. Number 2, the second one, when you're getting a little bit more advanced, is the Clifton Strengths. I think that's another fantastic one. Again, telling you like, these are the things you do well, and here are the things you should be looking out for. Sometimes, because we do things well, there are blind spots we have, and it's hard for us to see what other people might need who may not be seeing things from your vantage point. So to me, these 2 things, these 2 assessments, even if you only pick one, basically help you build a really, really, really strong foundation and culture of psychological safety. If you had asked me 10 years ago, I probably would have said, oh, try these apps or try this. But after doing the research and after really looking at, Design 39 to talk about my documentary and my school and upcoming book, is the importance of building trust and a culture of psychological safety. So I think the strengths assessment does that. Number 2, I would look at whatever your vision statement, learner profile. Everybody has something a little bit different. Whatever your vision is, your mission, your values, your strategic priorities, I would lean into those so much. And once I have sort of those 2 pieces together, then I would go around and I would basically do it for myself as well, but I would interview the different people on my team and even honestly find a way to do it inside my organization and be like, what are the things that you're struggling with right now? What are the top 3 challenges that are in your way right now? And if there were 2 things you could do right now, but you feel like you can't, whether it's because of resources, time, or whatever, scarcity mindset it is that you have that's holding you back, what would those 2 things be? With all of that data, now I feel like you are so well positioned to have a criteria for what type of technology to bring into your environment. So for example, prior to tools like ChatGPT, which is, by the way, where I would start, no matter, like, there's so many great tools out there, but I still feel like it's the most all-inclusive, which allows somebody who is either needs an entry point, or somebody who doesn't want to get overwhelmed by so many different tools. It's definitely the most inclusive place where you'll get to learn a little bit of everything. But I feel like whereas before, we would all take an assessment like that, right? Like a strengths test or something like that. And we would love it in the moment while we were sharing. But afterwards, nobody has everybody's strengths test lined up every time they're about to give feedback or design an experience or something like that. But with your AI tools, because you can share all of that data in there, of course, in a safe way, it's so easy then to be like, okay, I need to plan this experience to do, a professional development. Well, how should I design it so it's aligned with people's strengths? Or we have a project coming up. Who should I delegate something to so it's aligned with people's strengths? This is the aspiration of those types of, personality tests and strengths tests that we do. But the reality of being able to implement it in your day-to-day is so hard. I also shared, how to do a survey looking at people's challenges and, opportunities they're interested in. That data analysis on that would have, been time consuming, which is why we don't often do these things. So now being able to go in and just, run those results and run that data through and ask ChatGPT, like, hey, what are 3 things we can do to solve for this? What's a plan or an email I can share back to this person after this conversation? Those things that once used to seem so aspirational are now so realistic and so practical that it's almost like if you're not doing those things, it's a loss to you in the organization. And so, put it in a nutshell, I guess, my thing would be, don't start with apps, don't start with the technology. Use your sort of like strength of maybe not having that, being immersed in all that tech as an advantage to really amplify the human elements of your organization, the people in your organization, and to really strengthen the culture, but from a place of people's strengths. I think it just builds so much confidence. It helps create so much clarity in your vision. And I think ultimately that's really what builds great communities. I think the one thing I would consider is looking at portfolios for students. I think the more we can help students graduate into a world where they know how to showcase their skills and their strengths, the better the prepared they'll be to pivot, to adapt, and to see themselves somewhere. I think that's one thing that I think is so important for everybody right now, is that everybody can see themselves fitting in somewhere or having a place somewhere. I think at a time when you see technology that oftentimes feels like it's doing what you're doing, it's because we don't always get to do the things that are authentically us and that we're actually meant to do. Those things always sit on our wish list. And so I think when you start from a place of people's strengths and people's skills, tomorrow your industry might change, but your skills and strengths are still yours that can be applicable in so many places. And so I think it's such an important message to constantly reinforce in kids that these are your skills, these are your strengths. I was looking back now, my dad really did that for us. We never really defined ourselves by like titles or like industries per se. And I feel like knowing this is what I bring to the table, these are my strengths in your personal life and in your professional life, in every area, you have a strong sense of purpose and sense of self. And I think that's really important today.
So one of my main pieces of advice this year going back into school would be to do some kind of survey or audit to see where your staff are at with the AI and what tools they're using. Because as a school leader, really, you should have a hold and have a responsibility to know what tools and your staff are using and how that might impact how they're preparing their lessons or how they're preparing resources, if they're using any student-facing AI tools through a wrapper platform without you being aware of that and not having proper safeguards in place. So I would say the best thing to do with AI as you go back is to know what your staff are using, give some guidelines from you as a school, say how you would like them to be using it and what kind of things you would not like them to do. And then offer training and guidance. That's the main thing, is just make sure that you have a handle on what AI is happening in your school.
Okay, so let's go with the fact that maybe my school aren't offering it as much, and there's some schools that aren't. If I'm still interested to go and learn about AI, where would be your recommendations in terms of either books or people to follow or things to go and watch? What would you recommend for me?
Dan Fitzpatrick's book is a really great starting point. Also, the book from Leon Furs gives really it's called Practical Strategies with AI. It gives lots of practical advice for teachers who want to start using AI. So both of those books would be my starting point if I was going to buy a book. For anything else, I usually just go on LinkedIn. There's so much advice and guidance on there and people trying and experimenting. So LinkedIn is really kind of the place to be in terms of AI in education. I don't feel like there's much on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube as there is on LinkedIn. It seems, or even on Twitter, like LinkedIn seems to be the place for educators exploring it with AI.
Definitely. And I'll give you a shameless plug here, because if you are someone who is interested, there are numerous conferences coming up across this next.
Yes, there are numerous conferences, and you're more than welcome to come to mine in February in Bucharest on the 15th of Feb. And so everyone's welcome, more than welcome, anywhere in the world, fly in.
Yeah, we'll leave the information in the description below as well. But again, it's good to have that versatile approach in terms of, look, you can read about it, but actually seeing and doing and having that guidance there is that next step up in terms of exactly what we want.
I was going to say, I feel like last year was a lot of scene setting and people getting to grips with what AI tools were out there and maybe experimenting, trying some platforms, seeing what worked and what didn't work for you and your school. But I think now we're shifting into people just want examples and people want to know practical ways. How could I use AI right now to have a positive impact on me as a teacher in terms of my workload? And also, how can I use it to support my students, either through lesson planning or, if you're feeling brave enough, putting some AI out there with your students as well?
Yeah, and that's really what I want to explore with you, because it's something you've done exceptionally well across this year and continue to do so, but it's with the student side of things. Let's think of it now in terms of, I've surpassed, and I think my level of AI knowledge is good. I'm using it as an educator. I've been planning and doing. I feel competent, but I want to get it now built into my curriculum with students. Where's a good place to start? And could you give us an example of the types of things that we could be doing?
So the main example that I've done this year was I teach computer science. So I picked a task, which is I lose lots of time in my programming lessons where a student has an issue with their code. And then I'm with one student for 10 minutes and the other students might also need help with their code. And I'm completely unavailable for that time. So I invented a decoding bot, or created a decoding bot, which students can interact with, drop in their code, and it's prompted so it won't give answers. It only directs them and guides them to where issues could be, the same as I would do. And in my mind, that meant that instead of the students waiting for 9 minutes and 30 seconds while I was with the students, those students can be productive and carry on with their learning and be guided, because it might just be a missing bracket. It might be something larger. I'm still there and available as the teacher, the human in the room, but it just allowed to gain back some of that lost time. We've also seen great success with in the languages lessons where students can chat. We created a Spanish language chatbot where the students could interact with it and it would correct their grammar and have a conversation with them back and forth to try to draw out or kind of take them to their limits of their language skills and stretch them a little bit further. And then role playing is always fun. We did some Eliza Doolittle and Henry Higgins. We're going to toy around with Animal Farm next year, just kind of interacting with characters and taking their learning to another level. And but always, I think I've posted about online, it's like the AI sandwich, I call it, with students, where we always do like a human activity where we plan how we're going to use the AI or come up with questions we're going to ask Eliza Doolittle or Henry Higgins. Then we go into the AI activity. And then there's a human part after it where we discuss, do a bit of group work, we do an activity. So it's not just, in my lessons, it's not just putting students in front of an AI bot for 40 minutes to an hour and then hoping for the best. It's always wrapped around, or it's always part of the regular classwork and the regular flow of the lesson with those human checkpoints and my oversight, because I'm always, the teacher's always in the room, always checking that it's okay, the outputs are correct, and things are working as they should be. And we use a platform where we can see all the students' conversations as well. So we know at the end if the students have had productive conversations, what kind of things they're asking. So we can then unpick that and either improve the bot for the next time we use it, or at least feel like we've got a handle on the learning. And next year, when we're going to roll this out in a slightly larger scale at my school, and maybe they might be interacting with these bots at home, it just gives us a bit of peace of mind that we know they're logging into a platform. We know we can see their conversation histories, The administrator on this account for the school can see all the bots all the teachers have created and see all the prompts, so that we're building it with oversight if students are going to be interacting with it.
I think that's a really good piece of advice as well, because we often hear a lot of people going, starting with AI, yes, there's ChatGPT, go and play and explore, and then we know there's Claude, we know there's Gemini, we know there's Poe, we know there's a cluster of sound, like standalone platforms that we can be using. But the one that you're talking about in terms of Mindjoy, I think is really good. And actually to name drop, I don't mind it, but for people out there, because one of the things that we often struggle with is, as a teacher, is where do I start? What would be a good platform that's safe and has these guardrails that are really important? And everything you've just said there about oversight, I can see what the students are typing. I've got a control over the bot, because one of the things you mentioned there that might scare people going, oh, geez, you've made a bot. That must take so long. That must be so difficult to do. I must have to have a real depth of knowledge to do that. Is that the case, or is it easier than it sounds?
It's not. Creating bots is pretty straightforward. You've just got to give it a role, give it the task you want it to achieve, and any particular formatting. Like, for example, with that programming bot, I just added a line saying never give them answers, always guide them. So just giving the same instructions, I try to think of it as I tried to break down how I would do it as a teacher and break that into the tasks. Maybe that's the computer scientist in me coming out, where I'm going to go like, what do I do when I go to look at a kid's code? I read it, I then try to find the errors, and then I ask guiding questions and just trying to bring that pedagogy into the prompt. But it probably takes me longer to test it and make sure it's working correctly and it's giving consistent outputs than it would be for me to prompt it. My rule of thumb is if it works 5 to 10 times in a row without going a bit off of the rails, then that means the prompt is good and it's safe to go to students. But you can experiment and find your own comfort level.
And in terms of those educators who are interested in bringing it into their classroom as a starting point, I think it's a fantastic platform to start with, and actually just to run throughout the year and try, like you have, and experiment with and get different subjects like you have, like you talked. I know you've shown science, and I know you've shown languages, and you've obviously got computer science, and have a play around with it and get that feedback from the students. And I think that's a really good piece of advice for any educator out there who wants to bring it into their classroom and move away from the ChatGPTs of the world and have something that's more collaborative. I think that's a really good starting point. So yeah, that's amazing. Thank you for that. So everyone's going to be listening to this going, yeah, skills. And I'm a big one, skills over drills. Could you give us an example though, in terms of how I might take the AI to develop, or in terms of this critical thinking or these different types of skills?
Oh, now you've got me. Let me think of one. Now you've got me. I'm trying to think of an example that we've done, or an example I've got coming up where we use AI. I can give an example from the staff PD session, if that works. So one example of how we've tried to build in these critical thinking skills, group work, and a bit of AI. This is a staff-focused one. Our head of science was running a PD session on group work, and he created a chatbot which was a expert in group work and group work theory, and it became the 5th team member of the group. So they were working proactively together, coming up with discussions, but if they hit kind of like a wall or didn't know where to take things, they would interact with this kind of group work expert, and that would give them a bouncing off point to go to the next level. So and that's something where I'd like to see with AI in the classroom next year at my school, is using AI at tactical points during the lesson to kind of drive the learning forward. So, I've got another example, if I can share that, is like, so one example with students in the class is that quite often in front of their peers, they're not willing to admit that they don't know something 100%. So around our assessment periods, I created some bots that were very focused on, have a knowledge based on what I've taught them, had been prompted around that part of the course. And then I found that the students were interacting quite freely with this bot. And you could see them going into that learning pit where they had admitted they actually didn't know something to the bot privately instead of publicly. And you could see them go, no, I still don't get it. Can you explain it? a little bit more simply to me, and it'd go down again. I still don't get it, break it down a little bit more. And then you could see them go back up, and then they had that confidence. And then going into the assessment, they could explain it at the A-level standard, but they'd gone from not understanding it or kind of not quite understanding how it fitted with other parts of the course into having that private conversation, which then that fed into larger group projects and things like that as well. But that was a really practical use of AI where the students can kind of like have those conversations and use it as a real like learning support tool.
Yeah, I think what sounds like that, what you've hit on is almost that metacognitive, students having their own understanding learning. Because for us as teachers, they may ask us a question and we'll explain it to them and we think that's good enough. And they'll just go, okay, great, thanks, sir. And we move on. Whereas actually having that there in confidence where it's like, you know what, I don't understand it and I need to dig a little bit deeper to simplify and to have that and then build back up. I think that shows real understanding of your own learning strengths and what you need. So I think that's a really good example you've given there, being able to provide a tool to students to be able to have control and agency over their own learning.
Well, I think that's one of those things about those human skills as well. If we can build those skills that students are willing to admit they don't know something and then go through a process, even if it might not be an AI, it could be going to the library, it could be speaking to a teacher, it could be watching a YouTube video. They're becoming kind of taking more ownership over their learning and finding ways to kind of master concepts that they didn't quite fully understand, or at least to be humble enough to admit that they didn't get it the first time round and they need a little bit of support.
Thanks to Smart Technologies for making today's episode possible. Smart is at the forefront of blending education with interactive solutions that are as engaging as they are effective. From lesson planning to collaboration tools, Smart is helping schools across the globe create dynamic learning environments. Visit their website to learn more and discover how Smart Technologies can support your school's journey into the future of education. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the International Classroom. We hope our discussion on implementing AI has sparked new ideas and strategies for your classroom. Your support means the world to us, so if you've enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to subscribe, rate, and leave us a review. It helps us to continue bringing you the content that matters most. We'll see you next time for more insights into global education.